The moment Victor opens that bag, everything changes. Not because he finds a weapon, not because he discovers a map, not even because it belongs to the man in yellow. It's because the contents of that bag may finally explain what this town has been doing for decades. Inside that vehicle sits a pouch filled with human teeth. A detail so disturbing that it's easy to dismiss as another piece of horror imagery. Another creepy visual designed to make audiences uncomfortable. From has always been filled with unsettling objects, strange symbols, and impossible discoveries. But this feels different, because the longer you stare at those teeth, the harder it becomes to ignore a terrifying possibility. What if those teeth aren't trophies? What if they're records? And if that's true, then Victor may have just uncovered evidence that the town has been documenting its victims across countless cycles, long before Boyd, Tabitha, Jade, or anyone else ever arrived. For years, From has hidden its biggest answers behind seemingly insignificant details. Drawings, symbols, nursery rhymes, broken memories, fragments that appear random until suddenly they aren't. Episode 7 feels like one of those moments, because the discovery inside the man in yellow's car doesn't create a new mystery. It potentially reveals the structure behind every mystery we've been watching. And once that possibility enters the conversation, the entire mythology of From starts looking very different. The first thing worth discussing is the car itself. Most viewers immediately focus on the teeth because they're shocking. But the location of the discovery is arguably more important than the discovery itself. Why are they inside that vehicle? Why preserve them there? Why connect them specifically to the man in yellow? Throughout the series, vehicles have represented transition points. People arrive through movement. They cross boundaries, they leave one reality, and unknowingly enter another. The man in yellow's vehicle suddenly feels less like transportation and more like infrastructure. A place where something is transferred. A place where something is stored. A place where a process concludes. The car doesn't feel abandoned. It feels maintained, purposeful, as if it exists to serve a function within a larger system. And that interpretation becomes significantly more disturbing when combined with the teeth. Because teeth are unique among human remains. They survive. They endure. Long after other evidence disappears, teeth remain. Investigators use them to identify the dead. Archaeologists use them to reconstruct history. Records are built from them. That matters, because if someone wanted to preserve proof that specific people existed, teeth would be among the most reliable methods imaginable. Suddenly, the bag doesn't look random. It looks organized, intentional, curated. And if that's the case, then we're no longer looking at a monster's collection. We're looking at an archive. What's fascinating is how well this possibility aligns with recurring imagery that From has been quietly repeating for years. Think about the visual language of the show. Broken smiles, distorted faces, damaged mouths, missing features, drawings that emphasize fragmentation, characters whose identities seem incomplete. The series repeatedly returns to images of people being altered, divided, or reduced into pieces. At first, these details seem purely symbolic. Now, they feel suspiciously specific, especially when viewed alongside Victor's discovery. The town has always appeared obsessed with memory, not survival, memory. Who remembers? Who forgets? Who retains information after traumatic events? Who carries knowledge from one generation to the next? Victor sits at the center of that pattern. And that's why episode 7 feels like a Victor episode disguised as a Man in Yellow episode. Because the most important thing about Victor isn't that he's survived longer than everyone else. It's that he remembers, or at least remembers more than he should. Every major force in From appears connected to information control. Characters forget details. Dreams erase themselves. Visions arrive fragmented. Answers appear incomplete. The town behaves like a machine that constantly edits memory. Victor is the exception. Not because he possesses all the answers, but because pieces of previous stories remain trapped inside him. He carries echoes, fragments, residual information. And that's exactly why his discovery of the teeth matters. Because if the teeth truly represent completed records, completed lives, or completed cycles, Victor immediately becomes the anomaly. Everyone else becomes data that has been filed away. Victor becomes the unfinished file, the record that never closed, the story that never ended. And systems built on repetition don't like unfinished stories. That's where the man in yellow enters the conversation. Ever since his arrival, viewers have tried to classify him. Is he a monster? A god? A puppet master? A survivor? A manifestation? Episode 7 offers another possibility. The man in yellow doesn't behave like chaos. He behaves like administration. Watch his appearances closely. He arrives during moments of transition, moments when rules change, moments when the structure of the town appears threatened, moments when information surfaces. His actions consistently align with maintenance rather than destruction. That's a crucial distinction. Predators kill because they want something. Administrators intervene because systems require something. And the teeth may reveal exactly what that requirement is: documentation, collection, preservation, the maintenance of records. For years, critics and analysts have pointed out that FROM's horror isn't random. One of the most consistent observations and breakdowns from entertainment outlets is that the town operates according to rules, even if those rules remain hidden from the audience. Everything has structure, everything has conditions, everything follows patterns. The monsters follow patterns, the visions follow patterns, the arrivals follow patterns. Even the apparent randomness follows patterns. The man in yellow increasingly feels like someone who understands those patterns because he's connected directly to them. Not their creator, not necessarily their master, but their caretaker, their auditor. The individual responsible for ensuring the process continues uninterrupted. And that's where Sophia suddenly becomes extremely interesting. One of the strangest aspects of the mythology surrounding Sophia has always been her inconsistency. Sometimes she appears helpful, sometimes distant, sometimes observant, sometimes seemingly disconnected from events unfolding around her. Viewed traditionally, those shifts create confusion. Viewed through a systems-based interpretation, they begin making sense, because Sophia stops feeling like an individual character and starts feeling like an operational layer, an interface, a point of contact, a mechanism through which the larger system interacts with its subjects. That would explain why her behavior changes depending on circumstances. Different functions, different objectives, different requirements. The system doesn't always need the same thing. Sometimes it needs observation, sometimes manipulation, sometimes guidance, sometimes silence. Sophia becomes the visible side of a hidden machine. The man in yellow becomes the invisible side. And the teeth become evidence that the machine has been running for far longer than anyone realized. But perhaps the most chilling element of episode 7 isn't the archive. It's what Victor does immediately afterward. Because Victor has always interacted with objects differently than everyone else. He doesn't simply discover things. He uncovers remnants, artifacts, pieces of forgotten histories, the drawings, the memories, the hidden locations, the things everyone else overlooks. Victor repeatedly stumbles across evidence that previous stories existed before the current story began. That's not accidental. It's the role he serves within the narrative. He's the bridge between cycles, the witness nobody can fully understand, the person carrying traces of realities that have already ended. And if this theory is correct, episode 7 confirms something enormous. Victor isn't just remembering the past. He's remembering previous versions of the town, previous iterations, previous runs of the same process, every strange feeling he's had, every fragmented recollection, every incomplete memory. They stop looking like trauma. They start looking like continuity leakage, information escaping containment. Which brings us to the poster. One of the most overlooked moments in the episode involves Victor's interaction with imagery, emphasizing fragmented faces and damaged features. At first glance, it feels symbolic, artistic, atmospheric, the kind of visual storytelling From excels at. But once the teeth archive enters the equation, the symbolism gains a second meaning. The poster no longer feels decorative. It feels instructional, almost like a representation of what the system does to people. Identity fragmentation, memory fragmentation, narrative fragmentation. People arrive whole. The town breaks them apart, and then something records the results. That interpretation transforms the entire episode. Because suddenly every object becomes evidence. Every image becomes data. Every clue becomes part of a much larger architecture hiding beneath the surface. Which leads directly to the biggest implication of all. The town itself may not be a location. It may be a process, a repeating process. A mechanism designed to take groups of people through specific stages before resetting and beginning again. That possibility explains countless mysteries simultaneously. Why certain events repeat. Why symbols recur across generations. Why Victor remembers things others don't. Why information appears fragmented. Why newcomers constantly seem connected to stories that began long before they arrived. The town isn't haunted by its past, the town is continuously recreating its past. And if that's true, then the teeth become the strongest physical evidence we've seen so far. Not because they're horrifying, but because they're measurable, countable, organized, archived. The physical residue left behind after a cycle concludes. Which finally brings us to the most dangerous implication of episode 7. Victor has seen the archive. He has looked behind the curtain. He has discovered evidence that the process exists. And systems built on repetition can survive almost anything except awareness. A loop functions because participants don't understand the loop. The moment someone recognizes the pattern becomes vulnerable. That's why Victor matters. Not because he's the hero, not because he's the chosen one, but because he's the error, the incomplete record, the unresolved entry, the piece of data that never properly entered the archive. The town has spent years trying to maintain its structure, trying to preserve its cycle, trying to ensure every story ends where it's supposed to end. Victor's existence threatens all of that. And episode 7 suggests the threat has now escalated because discovering the teeth means discovering the evidence. Discovering the evidence means recognizing the archive. And recognizing the archive means recognizing the system. For the first time, the illusion of randomness is collapsing.